The winter did not end that year. The ice gripped the North Sea like a dead man's hand. In Kattegat, the grain supplies turned to black dust inside the silos. The sheep froze in the fields where they stood. It was the year 793, but time seemed to stop. The old wooden statues of Odin and Thor stood silent in the dark temple. They offered no heat. They offered no food. The seer, who had lived for 100 years, screamed in his sleep for 3 nights. He saw a fire that did not burn wood. He saw a man who was not a man. The people were afraid. They looked to their earl, but the earl had no answers. The ships were locked in the harbour by thick ice. No one could leave. No one could raid to find food. The hunger began to change them. Men looked at their neighbours with wolf eyes. The social order was breaking down. This is how the end of the world begins. It does not start with a loud noise. It starts with an empty stomach and the cold. Then the stranger came. He did not ride a horse. He did not sail a ship. He walked out of the white storm from the high mountains. He wore gold armour that shone even without the sun. He was taller than any Viking. His face was hard like stone. He carried a sword that hummed with a low sound that hurt the ears. He did not shiver. The snow melted where he stepped. He walked straight to the great hall of Kattegat. The guards raised their axes to stop him. The stranger did not slow down. He looked at them. The guards fell to their knees. They dropped their iron weapons. They did not know why they did this. It was not magic. It was simply that their bodies refused to fight him. He was absolute authority made flesh. He pushed open the heavy oak doors. The earl sat on his throne, shivering in heavy furs. The stranger stopped in the center of the room. The fire in the pit flared up, turning from orange to blinding white. The stranger spoke. He did not speak Norse. He spoke a language no one knew, yet everyone understood him perfectly. He said only one sentence. "I am the revelation." The earl stood up. He tried to draw his sword. His hand would not move. The stranger walked to the throne. He did not attack. He simply waited. The earl looked into the stranger's eyes and saw eternity. The earl saw the stars burning. He saw armies of millions. He saw the truth of his own smallness. The earl wept. He knelt on the cold floor. The stranger sat on the wooden throne. It creaked under his weight. The wood seemed to change. It darkened. It became hard like iron. The reign of the old gods was over. The Imperial Truth had arrived in the frozen north. The seer in the temple died that instant. His heart stopped beating. He could not exist in the same world as the master of mankind. The ravens outside stopped calling. The wind stopped howling. There was only the sound of the stranger's breathing. It sounded like the turning of a great machine. The Vikings were no longer just raiders. They were now the first recruits. The long war had begun. The sun rose over Kattegat, but it looked different. The light seemed cold and hard. The people did not sleep well. They woke up with a feeling of heavy pressure in their chests. It was the presence of the Golden King in the great hall. He did not sleep. He sat on the throne all night. He did not move. His eyes stayed open. He was planning. The earl was gone. The earl had not been killed. He had been demoted. He was now just a manager of grain. The Golden King did not waste human resources. Killing a man who could work was inefficient. The Golden King walked out of the hall when the sun touched the roof. He looked at the muddy streets. He frowned. Chaos was the enemy. Mud and dirt were forms of chaos. He pointed a finger at the ground. He called the builders. He did not ask them to work. He commanded them. His voice vibrated in their bones. He told them how to mix stones and sand to make a hard road. He drew a line in the mud. He showed them where to dig ditches for waste. Disease was also an enemy. It wasted the lives of soldiers. He would not allow it. Ragnar Lothbrok came from his farm 2 days later. He walked into town with his wife Lagertha. They saw the changes. The mud was gone. The main street was paved with flat stones. The smell of rot and animal waste was gone. The people were working. They were not talking. They were not laughing. They moved fast. They carried heavy logs and baskets of stone. Ragnar stopped a man he knew. The man's name was Thorstein. Thorstein looked tired, but his eyes were wide and focused. Ragnar asked him what happened. Thorstein said the Golden King gave orders. He said if they worked, they would not starve. He said the Golden King knew how to make the earth give more food. Ragnar was curious. Ragnar was a man who wanted to know things. He wanted to sail west to find new lands. He thought this new king might help him. Lagertha was not sure. She held her shield close to her body. She felt the heavy air. She said this king felt dangerous. She said he felt like a storm that never breaks. They went to the great hall. The doors were open. The guards stood like statues. They held their spears perfectly straight. They did not look at Ragnar. Ragnar walked inside. The Golden King stood by the fire. He was looking at a map on a table. The map was drawn on animal skin. It showed the north. It showed the islands to the west. It showed the big lands to the south. Ragnar was shocked. He had a secret sunboard to find the west. This king already had a map of the whole world. The king looked up. His face was perfect. It had no scars, it had no wrinkles, but his eyes looked older than the mountains. He spoke to Ragnar. He knew Ragnar's name. He did not ask who he was. He said Ragnar had a mind that looked for patterns. He said this was useful. The king said the old ways were over. There would be no more raiding for gold. Gold was a soft metal. It was useless for war. They would raid for land. They would raid for order. They would bring the Imperial Truth to the world. Ragnar asked what the Imperial Truth was. The king walked closer. The heat from the fire seemed to follow him. He said there were no gods. He said Odin was a lie. He said Thor was a lie. He said believing in gods made men weak. It made them wait for help that would never come. He said humanity was the only power. He said men must rely on steel and mind and will. Ragnar felt a chill. To say there were no gods was dangerous, but the king said it with such power that it sounded like a fact. It sounded like saying the sky is blue. Ragnar looked at the king's sword. It was huge. It was covered in wires and glowing runes. It was not magic. It was a machine. Ragnar understood then. This man did not need gods. He had built his own power. Ragnar smiled. He liked this. He liked the idea that he was responsible for his own fate. Lagertha was silent. She watched the king's hands. They were large enough to crush a human skull with one squeeze. The king gave Ragnar a task. He told Ragnar to go to the smithy. The blacksmith was a man who made simple axes. The king went with them. The smithy was hot and dirty. The king looked at the iron. He shook his head. He picked up a piece of iron ore. He crushed it in his hand. Dust fell to the floor. The king took a piece of charcoal. He drew a design on the wall. It was a new shape for a furnace. He explained how to pump more air into the fire. He explained how to fold the metal to make it stronger. He did not use magic words. He used numbers. He used angles. He explained that heat changes the structure of the stone. The blacksmith did not understand the science, but he did what he was told. He built the new fire. The heat was blinding. The iron melted faster. The liquid metal was pure. The king showed them how to cast it into a new shape. It was not a battle axe. It was a short sword. It was straight. It was thick. It was designed for stabbing and chopping. It was a weapon for a soldier, not a raider. Floki the boat builder heard the news. Floki loved the gods. He built his ships for them. He giggled and danced in the woods, but he was afraid. He felt the silence of the gods. He came to town to see the giant man. Floki stood in the market. The king was inspecting the grain supplies. He was telling the women how to dry the grain so the mold would not grow. Floki ran forward. He held the wooden statue of Loki. He screamed at the king. He said the gods would burn him. He said the gods were angry. The people stopped working. They watched. They were afraid of Floki's madness. They were more afraid of the king. The king turned slowly. He looked at Floki. He did not look angry. He looked bored. He looked at Floki like a man looks at a broken tool. The king spoke. His voice was not loud, but it silenced the wind. He said superstition was a disease of the mind. He said it was a parasite. He raised his hand. Floki fell to the ground. The king did not touch him. It was just the pressure of the king's will. Floki gasped. He felt like he was underwater. He could not breathe. The king said he would not kill Floki. Floki was a genius with wood. Floki knew how to make ships that could cross the deep water. The king needed ships. He told Floki to stand up. He told Floki to burn the statue. Floki cried. He loved the statue, but his hand moved on its own. He threw the wood into the fire. He screamed as it burned. The king nodded. He said Floki would build a new kind of ship. It would be wider. It would carry more men. It would not have a dragon head. Dragon heads were for scaring children. These ships would be for transporting armies. Floki obeyed. His heart was broken, but his hands wanted to work. The king's will was stronger than Floki's faith. Weeks passed. The winter ended early. The ice broke. The king said it was time to test their strength. A jarl from the south named Borg sent a messenger. Borg wanted the land of Kattegat. He heard about the new king. He laughed. He thought it was a joke. He said he would come and take the land. The king did not laugh. He did not send a messenger back. He ordered the men of Kattegat to gather. He did not call them Vikings. He called them the first cohort. He gave them the new straight swords. He gave them large rectangular shields. He taught them to stand in a line. He taught them to lock their shields together. He taught them to walk forward at the same time. Step, step, thrust, step, step, thrust. It was not the Viking way. The Viking way was to run and scream and swing axes. This was the way of a machine. Ragnar learned fast. He saw the strength of the wall. Lagertha led the left side. Rollo, Ragnar's brother, led the right side. Rollo was strong, but he was jealous. He wanted to be the leader. The king saw this. He told Rollo that envy was a waste of energy. He told Rollo to focus on killing the enemy. Jarl Borg arrived with 300 men. They stood on the hill. They screamed and banged their shields. They looked scary. They wore wolf skins and paint. The king stood in front of his first cohort. He wore his gold armor. It shone in the sun. He did not hold a weapon. He crossed his arms. He nodded to Ragnar. Ragnar yelled a command. The first cohort marched forward. They did not scream. They made no sound except the thud of their boots on the grass. Borg's men ran down the hill. They crashed into the shield wall. The wall did not break. The new iron shields held. The straight swords stabbed out from the gaps. Borg's men died in piles. They could not get through the wall. It was a slaughter. It was not a fight. It was a cleaning operation. The king watched. He noted the mistakes. He saw that the right flank was too slow. He made a mental note to drill them harder. Jarl Borg saw his men dying. He ran forward to fight Ragnar. Ragnar stepped out of the wall. He used the new sword. Borg swung a heavy axe. Ragnar blocked it with the square shield. The axe got stuck in the wood and iron. Ragnar stepped in. He thrust the short sword into Borg's chest. It was simple. It was efficient. Borg fell. The battle was over in 20 minutes. The king walked to the body of Jarl Borg. He looked at the survivors of Borg's army. They were on their knees. They waited to be killed. That was the custom. The king shook his head. He spoke to them. He said they were now his property. They were resources. They would not die. They would join the first cohort. They would learn the drill. If they refused, they would be used as labor in the mines until they died. The men agreed. They had never seen a leader like this. He did not care about glory. He cared about results. The population of Kattegat doubled. The king organized them. He created a schedule. Everyone woke up at the same time. Everyone ate at the same time. He created a school for the children. He did not teach them songs about gods. He taught them reading. He taught them simple math. He taught them history, but only the history of human victories. He taught them that the galaxy was full of enemies, and they had to be strong. The children learned fast. They stopped playing games about elves. They played games about war and logistics. Ragnar watched his son Bjorn. Bjorn was learning to count supplies. Bjorn was becoming a soldier before he was a man. Ragnar felt a strange sadness. The wild freedom of their life was gone. But he also felt pride. They were becoming something greater. They were becoming an empire. The king called for the ships. Floki had built 10 new ships. They were ugly. They were boxy and wide. But they were fast and stable. The king inspected them. He walked on the deck. He jumped to test the wood. He nodded. It was adequate. He called a meeting in the great hall. He pointed to the map. He pointed to England. He pointed to the kingdom of Northumbria. He said there was a monastery there called Lindisfarne. He said they had books, they had gold, but the king did not care about the gold. He said the gold was just metal to be melted down. He cared about the location. It was a strategic point. It was an island near the coast. It was perfect for a forward operating base. He explained the plan. They would not just raid. They would secure the island. They would build a fort. They would use it to launch attacks on the mainland. Ragnar stood up. He asked if they would kill the priests. The king looked at him. The king said the priests spread lies. They spread the idea of a false god. This was a virus. The virus had to be contained. The king said that they would offer the priests a choice: renounce their god and work for the Imperial Truth, or be removed. Ragnar nodded. It was harsh, but it was logical. The king's logic always won. Rollo asked about the treasure. The king looked at Rollo with cold eyes. He said the treasure belonged to the state. It would be used to buy more iron, to build more ships, to feed more soldiers. Personal wealth was a distraction. Rollo looked down. He was angry, but he was afraid. The king's presence was like a heavy weight on his neck. The night before they sailed, the king went to the high cliff overlooking the harbor. He looked up at the stars. He was not praying. He was calculating. He knew the threats that were out there in the dark. He knew about the warp. He knew about the chaos gods who were watching from the shadows. He knew they were laughing. They thought he was trapped on this primitive rock. They thought he was weak. The king clenched his fist. The metal of his gauntlet creaked. He would show them. He would build a fire of reason so bright it would burn away the shadows. He would start here with these savages. He would forge them into a weapon. It would take centuries, but he had time. He was immortal. The cold wind blew against his cape. He did not feel it. He felt only the mission. Below him, the town of Kattegat was silent. There were no drunken songs. There were no fights. There was only the sound of the blacksmith's hammer, clang, clang, clang. It beat like a heart of iron. The king turned and walked back down. He went to the ships. The warriors were already waiting. They stood in lines. They wore their new armor. They held their new swords. They did not cheer when they saw him. They snapped to attention. They slammed their fists against their chests. The sound was like a thunderclap. The king nodded once. He boarded the lead ship. Ragnar took the helm. Lagertha stood at the bow. Floki caressed the wood of the rail, whispering to himself, trying to hide his prayers. The wind filled the square sails. The fleet moved out of the harbour. They moved into the grey waves of the North Sea. They were not sailing to raid. They were sailing to conquer. The history of the world had changed course. The Imperium began now. On the open sea, the water was rough. The old Viking ships would have rolled and taken on water. The new broad ships cut through the waves. The king stood on the deck. He did not hold on to anything. His balance was perfect. He watched the horizon. He was teaching the navigators how to use the stars more accurately. He gave them a device he had made from brass and glass lenses. It helped them see the sun's angle even through thin clouds. The navigators were amazed. They treated the device like magic. The king corrected them. He explained the geometry. He made them repeat the math until they understood. There was no magic, only knowledge. 2 days into the journey, a storm hit. The waves were like mountains. The sky turned black. Lightning struck the water. The men were afraid. They thought Thor was angry. They looked at the sky with fear. They wanted to sacrifice a goat. The king stopped them. He walked to the mast. He shouted over the wind. He did not shout prayers. He shouted orders. He told them how to angle the sails to use the storm's power. He told them when to steer into the wave and when to let it pass. He turned the chaos of the storm into a source of energy. The ship moved faster. Ragnar laughed. He was soaked with the rain, but he was happy. He saw the truth of the king's words. The storm was not a god. It was just wind and water. It was a force to be mastered. They rode the storm toward England. They arrived in half the time it usually took. They saw the coast of Northumbria. It was green and soft. Smoke rose from small villages. The monastery of Lindisfarne stood on the island, white stone against the grey sea. It looked peaceful. It looked weak. The king looked at it through his brass scope. He saw the monks walking in the garden. He saw the lack of guards. He saw the lack of walls. He felt a moment of disgust. Peace without strength was not peace. It was just waiting to be destroyed. He lowered the scope. He turned to his warriors. He did not give a speech about Valhalla. He gave a tactical briefing. First squad secures the beach. Second squad surrounds the main building. Third squad secures the supplies. No looting until the objective is secure. No unnecessary killing. Slaves are valuable. Dead men are waste. The warriors nodded. They understood. They were ready. The ships hit the sand. The ramp dropped. The Emperor of Mankind stepped onto the soil of England. The invasion had begun. The monks of Lindisfarne did not understand what was happening. They saw the ships land. They expected screams and fire. They expected the Vikings of old stories. Instead, they saw a silent wall of iron. The first cohort marched onto the beach in perfect step. They did not run to the church to steal gold. They set up a perimeter. They secured the pathways. The Emperor of Mankind walked onto the sand. He looked at the monastery. He saw the inefficiency of the stone walls. He saw the weakness of the wooden gates. He walked to the main door. A young monk named Athelstan stood there. Athelstan held a cross. He was shaking. He spoke in Latin. He told the invaders to leave this holy place. The emperor stopped. He looked at the cross. He looked at Athelstan. He spoke in perfect Latin. He said that holiness was a measurement of utility. He said this place was now a forward operating base. He gently took the cross from Athelstan's hand. He crushed it into a ball of metal. He handed it back. He said the metal was now ready to be reused. Athelstan fell to his knees. He thought this was the devil. The emperor walked past him. The occupation was fast. The monks were gathered in the courtyard. They were not killed. The emperor needed scribes. He needed men who knew the land. He gave them a choice. They could work for the unification of mankind, or they could leave. Most were too afraid to leave. They stayed. The emperor went to the library. This was the true treasure. He did not care about the gold chalices. He cared about the maps. He cared about the records of harvest and population. He read the books at a speed that was impossible for a human. He turned the pages so fast it sounded like a fan. In 1 hour, he knew the political structure of England. He knew about King Ael of Northumbria. He knew about King Ecbert of Wessex. He knew their armies, their taxes, and their weaknesses. He ordered the gold to be melted down. The monks cried as their relics were turned into ingots. The emperor told them that gold sitting in a box does no work. Gold used to buy grain saves lives. It was simple logic. Then the work began. The Vikings wanted to celebrate. They wanted to drink the communion wine. Ragnar stopped them. He enforced the king's law. No alcohol while on duty. The king drew plans in the dirt. They would not sleep in the monastery. It was too soft. They would build earthworks. They dug deep trenches. They sharpened stakes. They built a star-shaped fort around the causeway that connected the islands to the mainland. The shape was strange to the Vikings. It had angles that allowed them to shoot arrows at anyone trying to attack the walls. It was a design from thousands of years in the future. The men complained. Their hands blistered. They were warriors, not diggers. The emperor took a shovel. He dug with them. He moved earth like a machine. When the men saw their god-king working, they stopped complaining. They dug until their hands bled. 3 days later, the catastrophe began. It did not come from an army. It came from the water. The island had a well. The water turned brown. It smelled like sweet rot. It smelled like dead flowers. The men who drank it fell ill. Their stomachs swelled. Their skin turned grey. They vomited black fluid. It was not a normal sickness. The emperor looked at the sick men. He saw the signs. This was not just bacteria. This was a touch of the warp. The chaos god Nurgle was testing him. The Lord of Decay had seen the emperor's order and wanted to bring rot. The emperor knew he could not explain this to the men. They would think it was a curse from the Christian god. They would panic. The emperor acted with cold logic. He established a quarantine zone. He separated the sick from the healthy. He ordered all water to be boiled 3 times. He ordered the use of latrines far from the camp. He created a filtration system using charcoal and sand. He explained it as science. He did not use the word magic, but the sickness spread fast. 20 men died in 1 night. Their bodies did not stiffen. They melted. The smell was terrible. Morale broke. Floki sat by the fire, rocking back and forth. He whispered that the Christian god was poisoning them. He said they should leave. He said they should go back to the sea. The men listened to Floki. They looked at the emperor with fear. They thought he had led them into a trap. Then the second hammer fell. King Aella arrived. He did not bring a small guard. He brought the full host of Northumbria, 4,000 men. They covered the hills opposite the island. They blocked the land bridge. They had archers, spearmen, and heavy cavalry. The Vikings were trapped on the island. They were sick. They were outnumbered 10 to 1. The tide came in and covered the causeway. They were cut off. Ael sent a messenger boat. The messenger shouted that they would starve the heathens. They would let the sickness take them. Then They would come and kill the survivors. Ragnar looked at the army on the shore. He looked at his sick men. He looked at the Emperor. For the first time, Ragnar felt doubt. He saw the logic of the trap. They had no food. The water was bad. The enemy was too strong. Ragnar asked the Emperor for a plan. The Emperor stood on the wall of the new fort. He looked at the enemy campfires. He saw thousands of lights. He was calm. His calmness was terrifying. He said the enemy had made a mistake. They had brought all their supplies to one place. They had concentrated their biomass. The Emperor went to the infirmary tent. The sick men were groaning. He walked among them. He did not wear a mask. He placed his hand on the forehead of a dying boy. A golden light flared from his hand. It was brief. It was not magic, he told himself. It was the manipulation of biological energy. He burned the virus out of the boy's blood. The boy gasped and sat up. The color returned to his cheeks. The Emperor did this for the next man. And the next. It took hours. The Emperor's face grew pale. This used his own vitality. He was feeding his own strength into them. He could not save everyone. He saved the ones who could still fight. He saved 50 men. They looked at him as if he were the sun itself. They fell to their knees. He ordered them to stand. He said gratitude was inefficient. He needed them to hold a sword. The next morning, the tide went out. The causeway was open. King Ael ordered the attack. He thought the Vikings were dying of plague. He sent his vanguard. 500 men charged across the wet stones. They screamed for God and Northumbria. The Vikings stood behind their new earth walls. They were tired. They were hungry. But they had seen the Emperor heal the sick. They had a fire in their bellies that was not from food. The Emperor stood at the gate. He held his great sword. He gave the order to wait. The Northumbrians ran closer. They reached the mud in front of the walls. "Loose," the Emperor said. The archers fired. They did not fire at random. The Emperor had drilled them to aim for the gaps in the armor. The arrows hit the Northumbrians. The charge slowed, but there were too many enemies. They climbed the earth walls. The hand-to-hand fighting began. It was brutal. The Vikings used their short stabbing swords. They worked in pairs, one blocked, one stabbed. It was the machine warfare the Emperor had taught them. But the weight of numbers was too great. The Northumbrians pushed them back. A breach opened in the wall. A giant Saxon warrior with a hammer broke through. He smashed a Viking's head. The line was breaking. The Emperor moved. He did not run. He blurred. He stepped into the breach. He swung his sword. The weapon was too heavy for a normal man. It sheared through the Saxon's hammer. It sheared through the Saxon's armor. It cut the man in half. The Emperor did not stop. He spun. The sword hummed. It created a vacuum in the air. 3 more attackers died in a single swing. The Emperor was an engine of death. He did not scream. He did not grimace. He killed with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. The Northumbrians stopped. They had never seen a man move like that. They saw his golden armor shining with no sun. They saw his eyes burning with psychic power. Terror broke them. They dropped their weapons and ran back across the causeway. The first attack was repelled, but the cost was high. 30 Vikings were dead. Another 40 were wounded. The Emperor looked at the bodies. He felt the loss of resources. Each of these men was a tool he had spent months sharpening. Now they were broken. He looked at the mainland. King Ael had thousands more men. Ael was angry now. He was preparing a second wave. He was building catapults. He would smash the fort from a distance. The Emperor knew they could not hold. The fort was unfinished. The supplies were 0. The sickness was contained, but the men were weak from hunger. Ragnar came to the Emperor. Ragnar was bleeding from a cut on his face. He said they had to leave. They had to get to the ships and try to break out by sea. The Emperor shook his head. The Northumbrian fleet had arrived while they were fighting. Blockade ships sat in the harbour. They were trapped on all sides. Ragnar looked at the ground. He thought it was the end. He thought they would die here on this rock. "We do not retreat," the Emperor said. "We advance." The Emperor called a council. He included Ragnar, Lagertha, Rollo, and the monk Athelstan. He asked Athelstan about King Aiel. He asked about the king's personality. Athelstan said Aiel was proud. He said Aiel believed he was chosen by God to kill the heathens. Aiel would not sleep until he saw the Viking leader dead. The Emperor nodded. Pride was a lever. Pride could be used. The Emperor outlined a new plan. It was not a defensive plan. It was a psychological strike. They would not wait for the next attack. They would provoke it tonight, but they would change the battlefield. The Emperor ordered Floki to take the remaining oil they had brought for the lamps. He ordered them to mix it with the dry grass and the pitch from the ships. They created primitive bombs. They filled clay pots with the mixture. Night fell. It was pitch black. The clouds covered the moon. The Northumbrian camp was loud. They were celebrating their future victory. They were roasting meat. The smell drifted to the starving Vikings. It was torture. The Emperor stood on the causeway. The tide was out again. He walked alone toward the enemy army. He carried a torch. He stopped in the middle of the land bridge. He shouted. His voice was amplified by his psychic will. It boomed over the noise of the ocean. It rolled over the hills. "Isle of Northumbria," the Emperor shouted. "You fight with the courage of a sheep. Come to me, or are you afraid of the truth?" The insult was calculated. It was heard by every soldier in the camp. King Aiel was furious. He ran out of his tent. He saw the lone figure in gold standing in the dark. He thought the Viking leader was mad. He thought he was offering a duel. Aiel saw glory. He ordered his personal guard, his best knights, to ride out and capture the man. He wanted to execute him publicly. The knights rode their horses onto the causeway. The wet stones were slippery. 50 heavy horsemen charged the Emperor. The Emperor did not move. He waited until they were 50 meters away. Then he dropped the torch. It was the signal. From the darkness of the mudflats on both sides of the causeway, the Vikings rose up. They had buried themselves in the mud. They were invisible. They threw the clay pots. The oil smashed onto the horses. Then they threw torches. The fire roared. The horses panicked. They bucked and slipped on the wet stones. The knights fell. The heavy armor dragged them down into the soft mud. They drowned in inches of water and mud. It was chaos. The Emperor walked through the fire. The flames did not seem to touch him. He walked to the led knight, who was trapped under his horse. He pulled the man up by his neck. "Go back to your king," the Emperor said. "Tell him I am coming for his crown." He threw the knight back toward the camp. The surviving horses galloped back, burning and screaming. The Northumbrian army woke up in terror. They saw demons in the dark. They saw fire walking. Panic began to spread. This was the Emperor's weapon, fear. He knew that a disciplined army could be broken by the unknown. But the physical toll was getting worse. Back in the fort, the food was gone. The men were eating leather straps. They were eating the moss from the stones. Lagertha found a stash of grain in the monastery cellar, but it was full of weevils. She cooked it anyway. It was protein. She brought a bowl to the Emperor. He refused it. He said his metabolism could sustain itself longer. He gave his portion to a young shield maiden who had lost an arm in the battle. The situation was critical. The fire ambush had bought them time, but it had not won the war. Aiel still had 3,000 men, and now Aiel was cautious. He would not attack again. He would starve them out. He ordered his men to dig in. He built a wall across the mainland side of the causeway. He was sealing them in. The emperor watched this from the tower. He saw the siege wall going up. He calculated the caloric intake of his army. They had 2 days before combat effectiveness dropped to 0. He had to force a resolution. He turned to Athelstan. "You know the scriptures," the emperor said. "You know the prophecies of this land." Athelstan nodded, terrified. "Then you will write a new one," the emperor said. He made Athelstan write a letter in Latin. It was a letter to King Ael. It claimed that the Vikings were not men. It claimed they were demons sent by God to punish Ael for his sins. It detailed secret sins of Ael that the emperor had deduced from the monastery records: stolen church funds, illegitimate children. It was a weaponized truth. The emperor ordered a prisoner to be released to carry the letter. The prisoner ran to the Saxon lines. He delivered the scroll. Aella read it. His face turned purple. The knowledge of his secrets terrified him. He thought the Viking leader was a warlock. The bishops around Aella whispered. They said maybe it was true. Maybe this was the judgment of God. The seeds of doubt were planted. The emperor was attacking the enemy's chain of command. He was attacking their faith. But as the sun rose on the 4th day, a new problem emerged. The ships, the blockade fleet, moved closer. They were preparing to land troops on the beach behind the fort. The Vikings would be attacked from the front and back. The emperor looked at Floki. "The ships," the emperor said. "Can they sail?" "They are trapped," Floki said. "The Saxon ships block the way." "We do not need to sail through them," the emperor said. "We will sail through them." He ordered the masts to be reinforced with iron bands. He ordered the prows to be sharpened. He was turning the transport ships into rams. It was a desperate gamble. If they failed, they would drown. If they succeeded, they would break the blockade and open a supply line. The emperor looked at his starving, sick, exhausted men. They were shadows of the warriors who had left Kattegat, but their eyes were hard. They had survived the plague. They had survived the assault. They had been forged in the fire of disaster. They were no longer a tribe. They were a unit. "Tonight," the emperor said, "we changed the definition of impossible." He did not sleep. He went to the forge they had built. He began to work on his sword. He needed it to be hotter. He needed it to cut through the hulls of ships. He etched microscopic runes of binding onto the blade. He was preparing for the boarding action. The catastrophe of the siege had pushed them to the brink of death. Now, only an act of absolute violence could save them. The emperor was ready to deliver it. The friction of the world was great, but his will was greater. He would break the back of England, or he would burn the island down to the bedrock trying. The night was black, and the sea was a wall of cold noise. The 10 modified Viking ships sat in the shallow water on the backside of Lindisfarne. They looked like floating coffins. The emperor had stripped away the dragon heads. He had stripped away the decorations. He had bolted heavy iron plates to the front of each prow. The ships were heavy. They sat low in the water. The men sitting at the oars were thin. Their ribs showed through their skin. They had not eaten a full meal in 4 days, but their eyes were fixed on the emperor. He stood on the lead ship. He radiated a heat that kept them from freezing. He did not give a speech. He raised his hand. It was a simple chopping motion. Go. The oars hit the water. The ships moved. They did not move with the grace of the old raiders. They moved with the ugly, unstoppable force of a piston. They rounded the southern tip of the island. The Saxon blockade fleet came into view. There were 20 Saxon ships. They were anchored in a line. The Saxon sailors were asleep or keeping watch lazily. They expected the Vikings to be starving in the fort. They did not expect a naval charge. The Emperor's ship, the Bucephalus, picked up speed. The wind was against them, but the rowers pulled with a manic strength. The Emperor had taught them a new rhythm. It was not a song. It was a count. 1, 2, 1, 2. The sound of the oars was a drumbeat of war. The Saxon watchmen shouted alarms. It was too late. The Bucephalus smashed into the side of the Saxon flagship. The sound was like a thunderclap inside a cave. Wood shattered. The iron-plated prow of the Viking ship cut through the Saxon hull like an axe through a rotten log. The shock threw men to the deck. The Emperor did not fall. He stepped onto the Saxon railing. He ignited his sword. The blade glowed white-hot. It was not magic. It was friction, and stored thermal energy released at once. He swung the blade. The mast of the Saxon ship fell. It crushed 3 sailors. The Vikings swarmed over the rail. They were weak from hunger, but they fought with the desperation of drowning men. They did not scream. They stabbed. They killed the Saxons to clear the deck. They did not loot bodies. They secured the cargo hold. Ragnar led the boarding party on the second ship. He found barrels of salted pork and ale. He wanted to sit and eat. His stomach screamed at him, but the discipline of the Emperor held him. Ragnar ordered the men to move the barrels to their own ship. It was a transfer of resources. It was logistics under fire. The battle lasted 1 hour. 6 Saxon ships were sunk. 4 were captured. The rest cut their anchor ropes and fled into the dark. The blockade was broken. The Vikings had food. They had water. They had a way out. But the Emperor did not turn north toward home. He pointed the ship south. He pointed toward the mainland coast, behind King Ael's siege lines. The Vikings looked at him with confusion. They had won. They had food. They wanted to go back to Kattegat. They wanted to see their wives. The Emperor looked at them. He said the mission was not complete. To retreat now would be to waste the momentum they had built. He said they were not going home. They were moving the front line. This was the strategic chain reaction. By breaking the blockade, the Emperor had turned the prison of Lindisfarne into a launching pad. He landed the ships on a rocky beach 5 miles south of the causeway. The men unloaded the supplies. They ate quickly. They did not feast. They ate for fuel. Then the Emperor ordered the march. It was 2 in the morning. The men were exhausted. Their muscles burned. But the Emperor began to walk. He walked at a steady pace. He did not stop. The men had to follow or be left behind in enemy territory. They marched through the dark fields of Northumbria. They moved like ghosts. They did not burn villages. They did not kill farmers. This terrified the locals more than fire. A silent army is more scary than a loud one. By dawn, they were positioned on a ridge overlooking the main road that led to King Ael's camp. The Emperor had placed them across the enemy supply line. He had cut the throat of the Northumbrian army without swinging a sword. When King Aelle woke up, his scouts told him the news. The blockade was gone. The Vikings were behind him. His food wagons had been captured. Aelle was a proud man, but he was not stupid. He knew he was trapped. If he stayed at the siege, he would starve. If he attacked the fort, he would be hit from behind. He had to turn around. He had to fight the army on the ridge. Aelle ordered his army to break camp. The siege of Lindisfarne was over. The Battle of Bamborough Ridge began. Aelle marched his 3,000 men up the road. He saw the Vikings on the hill. There were only 400 of them. Aelle laughed. He thought the Viking leader had made a mistake. He had trapped himself on a hill. Aelle ordered a full charge. He wanted to crush them with weight. The Emperor watched the Saxons come. He stood at the center of the line. He held a long spear now. He had discarded the sword for a moment. He needed reach. He ordered the shield wall to lock, but he changed the shape. He bent the line into a U shape. He was inviting the Saxons into a pocket. It was a classic trap used by the ancient armies of terror. The Saxons ran into the pocket. They thought they were pushing the Vikings back. They were actually being surrounded. The pressure was immense. Ragnar felt the weight of 10 men pushing against his shield. His shoulder felt like it was breaking. He gritted his teeth. He looked at the Emperor. The Emperor was holding the center with one hand. He was immovable. He was an anchor. The Saxons crowded into the killing zone. They could not swing their weapons. They were too packed together. The Emperor gave the signal. The Vikings on the wings pushed in. The trap snapped shut. It was a massacre of compression. The Saxons trampled each other. They suffocated. The Emperor stabbed with his spear over and over. He targeted officers. He targeted the men holding banners. He was dismantling the command structure. Chaos spread through the Saxon ranks. They broke. They tried to run down the hill. But the Vikings pursued. They did not run wild. They advanced in a line, sweeping the field. King Aelle saw his army disintegrate. He turned his horse to flee. He wanted to get back to his fortress at Bamborough. He rode hard. But the Emperor had anticipated this. He had sent Floki and a small squad of runners through the woods before the battle. They were waiting on the road. Floki threw a rope across the path. Aelle's horse tripped. The king fell in the mud. Floki jumped on him. He did not kill him. He bound his hands with a wire. The Emperor walked down the hill. He was covered in blood, but none of it was his. He looked at the field of dead bodies. He calculated the loss of biomass. It was high, but the strategic objective was achieved. He walked to where Floki held the king. Aelle looked up. He spat at the Emperor. He called him a heathen dog. The Emperor did not react. He wiped the spit from his face. He looked at Aelle like a man looks at a broken variable in an equation. "You are obsolete," the Emperor said. "Your form of kingship is based on vanity. Mine is based on necessity." He did not execute Aelle. He did not blood eagle him. That was the old way. It was performative cruelty. The Emperor needed Aelle alive. Aelle was the key to the locks of Northumbria. The Emperor dragged Aelle to the fortress of Bamborough. The guards on the walls saw their king bound and beaten. They saw the golden giant holding him by the neck. The Emperor shouted to the walls. He gave them a choice. Open the gates and live as citizens of the Imperium, or keep them closed and watch their king die, then die themselves. The gates opened. The Vikings walked into the great stone fortress. They had secure walls now. They had the royal granaries. They had the armory. The conquest of Northumbria was effectively over. But the war for England had just begun. This was the inflection point. The news travelled fast. It travelled to Wessex. King Ecgbert sat in his bathhouse. He read the scroll. He was a man of books and history. He realized what had happened. This was not a raid. Raiders take gold and leave. This new leader had taken the capital. He had taken the king. He was staying. Ecgbert felt a cold chill. He recognized a superior intellect. He realized that the petty wars between the Saxon kingdoms were over. A new predator had entered the ecosystem. Ecgbert sent riders to Mercia. He sent riders to East Anglia. He called for a grand alliance. He knew that if they fought this emperor one by one, they would all fall. He began to mobilize the largest army England had ever seen. He mobilized the church. He declared a holy war. He framed the conflict not as land against land, but as heaven against hell. Inside Bamborough, the emperor did not rest. He began to reorganize the society of Northumbria. He stripped the nobles of their titles. He set up a meritocracy. If a peasant could count and organize, he was put in charge of supplies. If a noble was lazy, he was sent to dig ditches. The social order was turned upside down. The people were confused, then terrified, then strangely relieved. For the first time, competence was rewarded. But the Vikings were suffering. The human thread of the story began to fray. They were far from home. They were tired. They missed their gods. Rollo was drinking heavily from the captured wine stocks. He was angry. He felt like a servant, not a warrior. He went to the emperor. He demanded they divide the loot and go home. He said the men were done. The emperor sat on the stone throne of Bambara. He looked at Rollo. He saw the weakness in Rollo's soul. He saw the need for validation. Home is a concept for children, the emperor said. We are building a new home, a home that covers the world. Rollo drew his sword. He was drunk. He was jealous. He swung at the emperor. It was a fast strike, strong enough to cut a man in two. The emperor caught the blade. He caught the sharp steel with his armored hand. He did not flinch. He squeezed. The steel shattered. Rollo stared in shock. The emperor stood up. He backhanded Rollo. It was not a full-strength blow. It was a corrective slap. Rollo flew across the room. He hit the stone wall and crumbled. His jaw was broken. This is your one warning, the emperor said. Do not confuse my patience for weakness. Ragnar watched this. He helped his brother up. Ragnar felt a gap growing between him and the emperor. He admired the emperor's mind. He loved the victories, but he feared the lack of humanity. He saw that the emperor did not care about them as people. He cared about them as components. Ragnar looked at his son Bjorn. Bjorn was cleaning his sword. Bjorn's eyes were cold. He was becoming like the emperor. Ragnar felt a father's grief. He was losing his son to the machine. The winter came again. But this time, there were inside stone walls. They had food. The emperor used the winter to train. He integrated the Northumbrian survivors into his army. He mixed them with the Vikings. He forced them to speak a new pidgin language, a mix of Norse and Saxon and High Gothic terms he introduced. He was erasing their tribal identities. He was creating a unified Imperial Guard. By spring, the emperor had an army of 5,000, but the horizon was dark. King Egbert had gathered the hosts of the south. 10,000 men were marching north. They had siege engines. They had heavy cavalry. They had the fanaticism of the church. They were coming to exterminate the Imperium before it could grow. The emperor knew he could not win a defensive war against those numbers. He had to change the rules again. He went to the dungeon where Aella was kept. Aelle was thin and broken. The emperor told him he was free to go. Aelle was confused. The emperor opened the door. He gave Aella a horse. He told him to ride to Egbert. He told him to deliver a message. Tell Egbert I do not want England, the emperor said. Tell him I want the world. And tell him that the first king who bows will be the first governor of a sector. The rest will be dust. Aelle rode away. He thought he was escaping. He did not know he was a virus. The emperor knew Aelle would cause friction in Egbert's camp. Aelle would demand command. He would demand vengeance. He would be irrational. He would disrupt Egbert's careful planning. The emperor was weaponizing Aelle's incompetence. Then the emperor went to the forge. He had been working on a secret project all winter. He had gathered the sulfur and saltpeter from the monastery stores. He had found charcoal. He had built simple iron tubes. He called Ragnar and Floki. He showed them the black powder. He showed them the tubes. The age of the sword is ending, the emperor said. We will greet them with thunder. He was introducing rudimentary firearms. Hand cannons, dangerous, unstable, but terrifying. He drilled a special unit of men to use them. He taught them the chemistry. He taught them the safety drills. The Mechanicus dogma was born here. the reverence for the weapon, the ritual of cleaning, the belief that the machine had a spirit that must be appeased with maintenance. The stage was set for the Battle of the Ash Fields. Egbert's army crossed the border of Northumbria. They burned everything in their path. They wanted to draw the emperor out. They wanted a field battle. The emperor obliged them. He marched his mixed army out of Bamborough. He did not hide. He marched to a flat plain covered in grey ash from burning crops. He formed his lines. The two armies faced each other. The silence was heavy. Egbert rode to the front. He looked at the golden figure in the distance. He felt a moment of doubt. He saw the discipline of the enemy. He saw that Vikings and Northumbrians stood shoulder to shoulder. That was impossible. That was unnatural. Egbert ordered the charge. His heavy cavalry, the pride of Wessex, thundered forward. 2,000 armoured horsemen. The ground shook. They expected the shield wall to break. The emperor waited. He stood with his new thunder corps. They held the iron tubes. They held the burning matches. The horses got closer, 500 yards, 300 yards. The ground trembled. Ragnar watched, sweating. He gripped his axe. He hoped the emperor's science was real. "Hold," the emperor said. His voice was calm. 100 yards. The knights lowered their lances. They screamed for God. "Ignite," the emperor said. 50 men lowered the matches to the touch holes. There was a ragged roar. Smoke billowed out. It smelled of hell. The lead balls flew. They were inaccurate, but at this range, against a wall of horses, they could not miss. The lead punched through shields. It punched through chainmail. It punched through horse flesh. The front rank of the cavalry disintegrated. Horses fell. Knights were thrown. The noise spooked the surviving horses. They panicked. They bucked and turned. The charge collapsed into a screaming pile of meat and iron. The Saxons stopped. They had never heard a sound like that. They had never seen death dealt from a distance by smoke. The emperor did not smile. He reloaded. He began the slow, rhythmic process of pouring powder. He was teaching them that war was not about glory. It was about industrial output. It was about the rate of fire. Egbert watched his knights die. He saw the smoke clearing. He saw the Golden King standing unharmed. Egbert realized then that his alliance, his holy war, his numbers, none of it mattered. He was fighting the future, and the future had no mercy. But in the chaos, a stray arrow flew. It was a lucky shot. It arced high over the battlefield. It came down. It hit Lagertha. It struck her in the neck, just above her armor. She fell without a sound. Ragnar screamed. He broke the line. He ran to her. The discipline broke. The emotional core of the army fractured. The emperor looked over. He saw Ragnar crying over his wife. He saw the men looking at Ragnar, not at the enemy. The momentum was lost. The Saxons were regrouping. The emperor felt a flicker of annoyance. Human emotion was a variable he could never fully eliminate. It was the weakness in the steel. He had to act. He had to save the battle, not with a gun, but with a symbol. He threw down the hand cannon. He drew his burning sword. He walked past the weeping Ragnar. He walked alone toward the confused Saxon army. "Look at me," he roared. The psychic force of it brought men to their knees. "I am the end of your world. Run and live. Fight and vanish." He charged alone. And for the first time, the emperor of mankind felt the true burden of leadership. He had to be the monster, so they didn't have to be. He waded into the Saxon infantry, a golden storm of death, buying time for his soldiers to remember who they were. The Battle of the Ash Fields descended into a bloody, grinding brawl. The outcome hung in the balance, suspended between the emperor's godlike power and the fragile, broken hearts of his men. The victory would cost them everything they had left of their humanity. The Battle of the Ash Fields ended not with a cheer, but with a silence that felt heavy enough to crush a man. The Saxons were gone. They had run into the twilight, broken by the thunder of the hand cannons and the sight of the golden giant. The Vikings and Northumbrians stood in the grey mud. They were covered in soot. They looked at the bodies of the horses. They looked at the Emperor. He stood alone in the middle of the carnage. His sword was no longer burning. It was just a piece of dirty metal. He did not look tired. He looked at the horizon, already calculating the pursuit vectors. But the men did not look at him with love. They looked at him with fear. They had seen him kill with the efficiency that was not human. It was like watching a landslide or a forest fire. It was a force of nature, and it was terrifying to stand next to it. Ragnar Lothbrok was on his knees. He held Lagertha. Her face was pale. The arrow had hit her in the neck, missing the main artery but severing the nerves and crushing the windpipe. She was drowning in her own blood. Her eyes were panic-stricken. She could not speak. Ragnar pressed his hands against the wound. The blood leaked through his fingers. He cried out for a healer. The camp doctors ran over. They looked at the wound. They shook their heads. It was too deep. The damage was too complex. They stepped back. They knew the look of death. Ragnar screamed at them. He grabbed a doctor by the tunic and shook him. He demanded a miracle. The Emperor walked over. His shadow fell over Ragnar. The Emperor looked down at Lagertha. He scanned her biology with his mind. He saw the torn tissue. He saw the failing oxygen levels in her brain. He saw the potential. She was a genetic outlier. She had reflexes and muscle density in the top 1% of the baseline human population. To lose her was a waste of a high-value asset. Ragnar looked up at the Emperor. Ragnar's face was wet with tears and soot. He begged. He asked the Emperor to use his power. He said he would do anything. He would serve for 1,000 years. He would give up his lands. Just save her. The Emperor paused. This was the small choice. He could let her die. It would be natural. It would allow Ragnar to grieve and eventually heal. Or he could intervene. He calculated the variables. Ragnar was unstable. Grief would make him useless as a commander for months. The campaign in the south needed momentum. He needed Ragnar focused. He needed Lagertha operational. The Emperor made his choice. He nodded. He said he would save the warrior. Ragnar wept with relief. He did not hear the specific word the Emperor used. He used the word warrior, not wife. They carried Lagertha to the nearest stone structure, an old Roman villa that stood near the battlefield. The Emperor ordered everyone out. He demanded absolute quarantine. He demanded metal tools, fire, and the strongest alcohol they had. He demanded wires of silver and gold. He demanded the carcasses of the strongest horses that had died in the charge. Ragnar wanted to stay. The Emperor ordered him out. The door slammed shut. Ragnar sat outside the door. He waited. He prayed to Odin. Then he prayed to the Emperor. He did not know who was listening. Inside, the Emperor went to work. He did not use magic. He used biology. He used the advanced medical knowledge of the 30th millennium applied with the tools of the 9th century. It was crude, bloody work. He opened Lagertha's throat. He removed the crushed windpipe. He replaced it with a tube he fashioned from silver and reinforced leather. It was a primitive bionic. He saw that her heart was failing from shock. He opened her chest. He reinforced the heart valves with strips of muscle taken from the war horses. It was a graft that should have been rejected. But the Emperor used his psychic will to force the cells to accept the new tissue. He was rewriting her immune system. He was knitting bone to metal. He worked for 12 hours. His hands moved faster than the eye could follow. He was not just repairing her. He was improving her. He saw the weakness in the human neck. He reinforced her spine with iron rods. He made her harder to kill. When the sun rose, the door opened. The Emperor walked out. He was clean. He had burned the bloody apron. Ragnar jumped up. He asked if she was alive. The Emperor nodded. He said she was functional. Ragnar ran inside. The room smelled of ozone and burnt meat. Lagertha lay on a table. She was breathing, but the sound was wrong. It was a harsh metallic rasp. Click hiss, click hiss. Ragnar touched her hand. It was cold. Her eyes opened. They were the same blue eyes, but the light behind them was different. It was flat. It was the eyes of a shark. She sat up. She did not groan. She moved with a sudden jerky speed. She looked at Ragnar. She did not smile. She did not say his name. She touched the silver tube in her throat. Ragnar asked her how she felt. She looked at him and spoke. Her voice was a monotone grind, amplified by the silver tube. She said she felt optimal. She asked for her sword. Ragnar stepped back. He felt a cold dread in his stomach. This was not the woman he loved. This was something else. He looked at the Emperor. The Emperor stood in the doorway. He said the subject was combat ready. He said emotion was a chemical defect that hindered performance. He had suppressed it to ensure survival. Ragnar realized then what he had done. He had sold his wife's soul to keep her body moving. The Emperor had not saved her. He had recycled her. The massive outcome of this choice began to ripple out immediately. Ragnar left the room. He vomited in the grass. He could not look at her, but the army saw her. They saw Lagertha walk out, iron in her throat, scars running down her chest, stronger than before. They did not see a monster. They saw a miracle. They saw that death was no longer the end. The Emperor could deny the grave. A religious fervor swept through the ranks. They fell to their knees. They worshipped the Emperor not just as a king, but as the god of death and life. The cult of the Emperor was born in that moment. It was fanatical. It was dangerous. The Emperor used this new fanaticism. He ordered the army to march south. They moved toward York. This was the largest city in the north. The Emperor did not want to sack it. He wanted to convert it. He took the city without a fight. The reputation of the Iron Angel, Lagertha, and the Golden God preceded them. The gates opened. The Emperor rode in. He looked at the winding streets. He looked at the wooden houses. He saw fire hazards. He saw inefficiency. He declared that York was no more. It was now Sector Primus. He began the transformations of the society. He needed weapons for the world conquest. He could not rely on village blacksmiths. He established the first manufactorum. He seized the central district of York. He tore down the houses. He built a massive structure of stone and brick. It was a factory, but it looked like a cathedral. He designed water wheels to power massive bellows. He designed assembly lines. One man made the handle. One man made the blade. One man sharpened it. It was the birth of industrialization 1,000 years too early. To feed the machine, he needed labor. He instituted the tithe. Every family in Northumbria had to provide one family member to the state, not to fight, but to work. Men, women, children. It did not matter. The Emperor measured them by hand size and stamina. Children were used to clean the small gears and reach into tight spaces. The parents cried. They tried to hide their children. The Emperor sent the press gangs. They were led by the new Lagertha. She did not listen to pleas. She did not feel pity. She kicked down doors. She dragged children out. She told the mothers that their children were serving the destiny of mankind. It was a high honor. The mothers screamed. Ragnar watched this from his command post. He drank ale to stop the shaking of his hands. He saw the face of his wife, cold and dead. doing the work of a tyrant. The economy changed. Gold was outlawed. The emperor introduced a new currency, labor vouchers. You earned food by working. If you did not work, you did not eat. There were no beggars in Sector Primus. There were only workers and fertilizer. The smoke from the factory turned the sky grey. The birds left. The trees died. The city became a dark, loud place of constant hammering. The Vikings who had come for adventure and gold hated it. They wanted to sail. They wanted to farm. They felt like they were in a prison. Rollo, who had recovered from his broken jaw, became the voice of this anger. He met with the captains of the ships. He met with the old farmers. He whispered treason. He said the Golden King was a demon. He said they had lost their souls. He said they should kill the emperor, burn the factory, and go back to the old ways. He went to Ragnar. He asked Ragnar to lead them. Ragnar looked at his brother. Ragnar was broken, but he was not stupid. He knew the emperor could not be killed by swords, but he also knew he could not live in this grey hell any more. Ragnar nodded. He did not agree to kill the emperor. He agreed to demand a departure. The confrontation happened in the great square of York. The factory whistle blew. Thousands of workers poured out, their faces black with soot. The emperor stood on the balcony of the manufactorum. He was reading reports on coal production. Rollo marched into the square with 2,000 angry Vikings. They were armed. They shouted for the emperor to come down. They shouted for freedom. Ragnar walked at the front, but his head was down. The emperor looked down. He did not look surprised. He had calculated the probability of rebellion at 87%. It was an expected variable. He walked down the stone stairs. He stood alone before the mob. He asked them what they wanted. Rollo stepped forward. He shouted that they were free men, not slaves. He shouted that they wanted to go home. "There is no home," the emperor said. His voice carried over the crowd. "There is only the mission. You are the foundation of a structure that will touch the stars. Your comfort is irrelevant. Your freedom is an illusion. The only truth is survival." Rollo screamed and charged. He thought the numbers would protect him. He thought the emperor would not kill his own workforce. He was wrong. The emperor did not move. He snapped his fingers. From the shadows of the factory gates, the Thunder Corps emerged. But they were not just men with hand cannons anymore. They were the first generation of the Tech Guard. They wore heavy plates of iron. Their faces were covered by leather masks to filter the smoke. And leading them was Lagertha. Lagertha moved like a spider. She intercepted Rollo. She did not use a sword. She used a powered gauntlet the emperor had built for her. It was a piston-driven punch. She hit Rollo in the chest. The sound of breaking ribs was like dry wood snapping. Rollo flew back. He landed at Ragnar's feet. He gasped blood. Lagertha stood over him. She raised her fist to crush his skull. "Stop!" Ragnar screamed. He threw himself over his brother. He looked up at his wife. "Lagertha, it's Rollo. It's us." Lagertha paused. The servos in her neck whirred. She looked at Ragnar. Her visual cortex processed his face. Name, Ragnar. Status, non-hostile. Emotional bond, deleted. She looked at the Emperor for instructions. The Emperor watched. This was the test. If he allowed mercy, the discipline would break. If he allowed cruelty, he might lose Ragnar permanently. But he decided that Ragnar was already lost. Ragnar was too human. He was a relic of the past era. The Emperor needed a new kind of general. He looked at Bjorn, Ragnar's son, who stood by the factory doors. Bjorn was watching with cold fascination. Bjorn liked the machines. Bjorn liked the order. "Stand down, Unit Prima," the Emperor said to Lagertha. Lagertha lowered her fist. She stepped back. The Emperor walked to Ragnar. "You have outlived your usefulness as a field commander," the Emperor said. "Your sentimentality is a liability. You are relieved of command." Ragnar looked at him with hate. "I quit," Ragnar spat. "I will take my men and I will leave." "You will take nothing," the Emperor said. "The ships belong to the Imperium. The weapons belong to the Imperium. The men belong to the Imperium. You may leave, but you leave alone." Ragnar stood up. He looked at the crowd. He looked for support, but the men were afraid. They saw the guns. They saw the Iron Maiden. They saw the power. They looked away. Even Floki looked away. Floki was now the head engineer. He was obsessed with the black powder. He had traded his gods for chemistry. Ragnar looked at Bjorn. "Coming, boy?" Ragnar asked. Bjorn looked at his father. Then he looked at the Emperor. He looked at the map of the world on the wall. He saw the future. "No, father," Bjorn said. "I have work to do." Ragnar Lothbrok, the greatest hero of his age, walked out of the city of York alone. He carried only a small axe and a cloak. No one stopped him. He walked into the mist. He was a ghost before he even died. The humanity of the Viking Age walked out with him. What remained was the Imperial war machine. With the descent removed, the Emperor accelerated the plan. He had secured the north. Now he needed the south. But he did not want to march an army all the way to Wessex. It was inefficient. He needed to strike the head of the snake. He called for the iron birds. These were not planes. They were hot air balloons. The Emperor had sketched the designs. He used the treated skins of whales to make the envelopes. He used coal burners to generate the lift. It was dangerous technology. But he did not care about safety. He cared about verticality. He built 3 of them. He loaded them with the thunderpots, grenades filled with black powder and nails. He placed Bjorn in command of the aerial unit. Bjorn was fearless. He understood the wind. They waited for a north wind. They launched from the hills above York. The balloons floated silently south. It took 2 days. They drifted over the forests of Mercia. The peasants looked up and screamed. They thought they were moons falling from the sky. They thought it was the end times. The target was Winchester, the capital of Wessex. King Egbert was there, safe behind his high stone walls. He was raising a new army. He felt secure. He did not look up. The balloons arrived at night. They hovered over the palace. Bjorn lit the fuses. He dropped the pots. They fell silently. Then the world exploded. The palace roof was blown apart. Fire rained down into the courtyard. The stables caught fire. The panic was absolute. The Saxons thought God was throwing lightning at them. They could not fight an enemy they could not reach. In the chaos, the Emperor's ground forces attacked. They had force-marched down the old Roman roads, paving them as they went to ensure supply speed. They arrived just as the balloons dropped their payload. They breached the gates of Winchester. It was not a battle. It was a liquidation. The tech guard moved in with their heavy shields and flamethrowers, simple pumps spraying burning oil. They burned the resistance out of the buildings. King Egbert was found in his library. He was not fighting. He was reading. He was reading the frantic reports of demons in the sky. The Emperor walked in. The room was filled with smoke. Egbert looked up. He smiled a sad smile. "You are not a man," Egbert said. "You are the end of history." "I am the beginning," the Emperor corrected. He did not kill Egbert. He needed an administrator for the southern sector. He told Egbert that he could live, but he would never be king again. He would be Prefectus Egbert. He would manage the grain tithe of the south. He would organize the roads. If he failed, he would be turned into a servitor, a lobotomized worker drone. The Emperor had already begun experimenting with this on the prisoners of war. Egbert had seen the drawings. He agreed. He had no choice. With England effectively conquered, the Emperor looked at the map again. He looked across the Channel. He saw Francia. He saw the Holy Roman Empire. He saw the vast biomass of Europe. But he also saw a problem. His army was still too small. He needed to scale up. He needed mass production of warriors. He returned to York, now called Hive Primus. He went to the deepest basement of the factory. This was his gene lab. He had been collecting samples from the strongest warriors, the ones who survived the surgeries, the ones who didn't die from the black powder fumes. He was looking for the genetic markers of resilience. He began the Astartes Project Alpha. It was not the true Space Marines. He did not have the technology for the black carapace or the gene seed, but he could create the Thunder Warriors. He took 50 young men, orphans of the war. He injected them with a cocktail of growth hormones extracted from the pituitary glands of giants and stimulants he synthesized from toxic plants. The process was agonizing. The boys screamed for days as their bones grew. Their muscles tore and rebuilt themselves thicker. Their skin turned grey and hard. Half of them died. Their hearts exploded. Their brains melted. The Emperor watched them die. He took notes. He adjusted the dosage. He did not mourn. He was refining the recipe. 25 survived. They stood 7 feet tall. They were hulking, ugly brutes. They were unstable. They were prone to rage. But they were strong enough to rip a horse in half. The Emperor clad them in crude plate armor made from melted down church bells. He gave them massive two-handed axes with motorized teeth. The first chain axes, powered by small steam engines on their backs. They were loud, dirty, and horrifying. He named them the Thunderwolves. Bjorn was given command of them. Bjorn looked at these monsters and felt a kinship. He was becoming less human too. He had replaced his own hand, lost in the siege of Winchester, with a mechanical claw. He stood before the Thunderwolves. They growled at him. He growled back. They understood dominance. The Viking Age was dead. The longships were rotting in the harbour, replaced by steam barges. The farms were empty, the fields worked by gangs of prisoners. The children were in the factories. The warriors were in the gene labs. The gods were dead, replaced by the Imperial Truth. And in the centre of it all sat the Emperor, a golden spider in a web of iron, planning the harvest of Europe. He had saved the Vikings from starvation, but he had doomed them to eternal war. The timeline had shifted irrevocably. There would be no Middle Ages. There would only be the Great Crusade, starting now, in the mud of England. But deep in the woods of the north, a shadow moved. Ragnar Lothbrok was not dead, and he was not alone. He had found something in the ancient caves, something the Emperor had missed, something that whispered to him, a voice that promised power not through order, but through chaos. The Emperor had brought order to the world, and in doing so, he had invited the attention of the ruinous powers. Ragnar listened to the voice. It sounded like blood. It sounded like war. Khorne had found his champion. Leo stands in front of the big metal door. He holds his sword tight in his hand. Maya stands next to him. She holds her magic staff. The staff glows with a blue light. They look tired, but they are ready. Leo, this is it, Maya. The Shadow King is inside. Maya, I am ready, Leo. We have to stop him. Leo pushes the heavy door. It makes a loud noise. The door opens slowly. Inside the room is dark. There are tall pillars made of black stone. At the end of the room is a throne. The Shadow King sits on the throne. He wears a black cape. He has a crown made of sharp iron. He looks at Leo and Maya. He smiles a mean smile. Shadow King. So you finally made it. I was waiting for you. Leo. It is over, Shadow King. Give us the Sunstone. Shadow King. You think you can take it from me? You are just children. Maya. We are not just children. We are the guardians of the light. The Shadow King laughs. His laugh echoes in the big room. He stands up. He holds a dark ball of magic in his hand. Shadow King, the light is weak. Darkness is strong. Watch this. The Shadow King throws the dark ball. It flies fast at Leo. Leo jumps to the side. The ball hits the wall. The wall cracks. Leo, watch out, Maya. Maya, I see him. Maya points her staff at the king. A beam of blue light shoots out. The king holds up his hand. A shield of shadow appears. The blue light hits the shield. It makes sparks. Shadow King, is that all you have? The king waves his hand. Shadows come out of the floor. They turn into shadow wolves. The wolves growl. They have red eyes. There are 5 of them. Leo, I will handle the wolves. You get the king. Maya, okay. Be careful, Leo. Leo runs at the wolves. One wolf jumps at him. Leo swings his sword. The sword hits the wolf. The wolf disappears into smoke. Another wolf bites at Leo's leg. Leo kicks it away. Maya runs toward the king. The king shoots more dark balls at her. Maya spins her staff. She blocks the dark balls. She gets closer to the throne. Shadow King, stay back, little girl. The king pulls a big sword from behind his throne. The sword is black and jagged. He swings it at Maya. Maya ducks. The sword hits a pillar. The pillar breaks. Maya, you cannot win. The sun will always rise. Shadow King, not today. Today the sun will be gone forever. Leo fights the last 2 wolves. He's breathing hard. He swings his sword left and right. He hits one wolf. It vanishes. The last wolf jumps on his back. Leo falls down. He rolls over. He pushes the wolf off. He stabs the wolf. It vanishes too. Leo, Maya, I am coming. Leo runs to help Maya. The king is very strong. He pushes Maya back. She falls on the floor. Her staff rolls away. Shadow King, now you have no magic. Now you loose. The king raises his black sword. He is ready to strike Maya. Leo runs fast. He yells loud. Leo, no. Leave her alone. Leo jumps between the king and Maya. He blocks the king's sword with his own sword. The swords crash. It makes a loud ring. Leo's arms shake. The king is very heavy. Shadow King, you are strong, boy, but not strong enough. The king pushes down. Leo falls on one knee. The king is too strong. Maya sees her staff. She crawls to it. She grabs the staff. Maya, Leo, hold on. Maya stands up. She closes her eyes. She thinks of the sun. She thinks of happy things. Her staff glows very bright. It is like a small star. Maya, light of the sun, shine now. A huge flash of light comes from the staff. It hits the Shadow King in the face. The king screams. He drops his sword. He covers his eyes. Shadow King, my eyes. It burns. Leo stands up. He picks up his sword. The king is stumbling. He cannot see. Leo, now Maya, use the binding spell. Maya, I am doing it. Maya waves her staff in a circle. Rings of light fly out. The rings wrap around the king. They tie his arms and legs. The king tries to break them, but the light is too strong. Shadow King, no, let me go. I am the king. Leo walks to the throne. On the arm of the throne is the Sunstone. It is a gold gem. It looks sad and dim. Leo reaches for it. Shadow King, do not touch it. It is mine. Leo, it belongs to everyone, not just you. Leo grabs the Sunstone. As soon as he touches it, the stone turns bright yellow. It gets warm. The darkness in the room starts to fade. The black pillars turn grey. The air feels lighter. Maya, you did it, Leo. Suddenly the floor shakes. The castle starts to rumble. Dust falls from the ceiling. Leo, what is happening? Shadow King, you fools. If I cannot have the stone, then no one can. The castle will fall. The king laughs even though he is tied up. The walls start to crack. Big rocks fall down. Maya, we have to get out of here. Leo, what about him? Maya, we cannot save him. The shadows are eating him. They look at the king. The shadows on the floor are pulling him down. He stops laughing. He looks scared. Shadow King, help me. Do not leave me. Leo, you chose the darkness. We cannot help you. The floor breaks open. The king falls into a deep dark hole. He is gone. The shaking gets worse. Leo, run, Maya. Run. They run to the door. The door is blocked by a big rock. Maya, oh no, we are trapped. Leo looks around. He sees a window high up. Leo, can you use your staff to float us? Maya, I can try, but I am very tired. Leo, you have to try. Look, the ceiling is falling. A huge piece of stone is coming down right above them. Maya, grab my hand. Leo grabs Maya's hand. Maya points her staff at the floor. She yells a magic word. A wind blows under their feet. They shoot up into the air. They fly toward the window. The big stone smashes the floor where they were standing. They fly through the window. They land on the hard ground outside. They roll in the grass. They look back at the castle. The tall black tower tips over. It crashes down with a giant boom. Dust goes everywhere. Leo coughs. He sits up. He checks his pocket. The sunstone is safe. Leo, we made it. Maya sits up too. She has dirt on her face. She smiles. Maya, we did. The Shadow King is gone. They sit there for a minute. They watch the dust settle. The sky starts to change. The dark grey clouds move away. The sun comes out. It shines on the land. The dead grass starts to turn green. Flowers start to open. Leo, look at the valley. They look down the hill. The village below looks safe. People are coming out of their houses. They are looking at the sun. Maya, they know. They know the darkness is over. Leo stands up. He helps Maya stand up. Leo, we should go back. My mom will be worried. Maya, my dad too. He told me not to go to the castle. Leo, we had to go. We were the only ones who could stop him. They start walking down the hill. The sunstone is warm in Leo's pocket. It feels good. Suddenly, a small shadow creature pops out from behind a rock. It is small like a cat. It hisses at them. Leo, one is left. Leo pulls out his sword. Maya lifts her staff. The creature looks at the sun. It looks scared. It runs away into a hole. Maya, it is scared of the light. Leo, good. Let them run. The light is back. They keep walking. The path is easier now. The thorns on the bushes are gone. Birds are singing. Leo, what will you do now, Maya? Maya, I think I will sleep for a week. Leo laughs. Leo, me too. And I want a big meal. Maya, I want cake. Chocolate cake. Leo, that sounds great. They reach the bottom of the hill. A group of villagers sees them. They run to meet them. Villager 1. Look, it is Leo and Maya. Villager 2. They are alive. Villager 3. Look at the sky. The sun is back. The villagers cheer. They lift Leo and Maya up on their shoulders. Everyone is happy. Leo sees his mom. She is crying happy tears. She runs to him. Mom, Leo, you are safe. Leo, I am okay, Mom. We did it. Mom hugs him tight. Maya's dad hugs Maya. Dad, I am so proud of you, Maya. You are very brave. Maya, thanks, Dad. The mayor of the village walks up. He is an old man with a white beard. He smiles at them. Mayor, you have saved us all. The shadow is gone. How can we thank you? Leo takes the sunstone out of his pocket. He holds it up. The villagers gasp. It shines very bright. Leo, we do not need a reward. We just want the village to be safe. We need to put the stone back in the town square. Mayor, yes, that is where it belongs. They all walk to the town square. In the middle is a stone stand. It is empty. Leo walks up to it. He places the sunstone in the hole. The stone clicks into place. A wave of warm light spreads out from the stone. It touches everyone. People feel happy and strong. The sickness from the shadow goes away. The crops in the field stand up tall. Maya, it is beautiful. Leo, yes it is. The mayor raises his hand. Mayor, let us have a feast. Today is a day of celebration. Everyone cheers again. They bring out tables and food. There is bread and cheese and fruit. And there is chocolate cake for Maya. Leo and Maya sit at a big table. They eat and drink. They are very hungry. The music starts to play. People start to dance. Leo looks at Maya. Leo, we make a good team. Maya, the best team. Leo, do you think the shadows will ever come back? Maya looks at the sunstone. It is glowing steady and bright. Maya, maybe. But if they do, we will be ready. Leo, yes, we will be ready. The party goes on until the stars come out, but the town is not dark. The sunstone glows soft like a moon. It keeps the shadows away. Leo feels tired. His eyes are heavy. Leo, I think I need to go home now. Maya, me too. See you tomorrow, Leo. Leo, see you tomorrow, Maya. Leo walks home with his mom. He looks at his sword. He hangs it on the wall in his room. He gets into his bed. It feels soft and warm. He looks out the window. He sees the light from the square. He closes his eyes. He is safe. The village is safe. The adventure is over. Leo falls asleep and dreams of flying in the bright blue sky. The next morning the sun rises again. It is a new day. Leo wakes up. He hears birds. He goes outside. The village is busy. People are working and playing. Leo sees Maya near the river. She is throwing stones into the water. Leo, hey Maya. Maya, hey Leo, did you sleep well? Leo, yes, like a log. Maya, look at the water. It is clear again. No more black sludge. Leo, that is good. We can swim in the summer. Maya, I cannot wait. They sit on the grass. It is peaceful. Leo, do you miss the adventure? Maya thinks for a second. Maya, a little bit. It was scary, but it was exciting. Leo, yeah. Being a hero is hard work, though. Maya, being a normal kid is nice too. Leo picks up a flat stone. He throws it. It skips 3 times on the water. Leo, I bet I can skip it 4 times. Maya, I bet I can do 5. Leo, you are on. They laugh and throw stones. They are just kids again. The sword and the staff are put away, but they know they are there if they need them. A butterfly lands on Leo's knee. It is bright orange. Leo, hello little guy. Maya, even the bugs are happy. Leo, everything is better with the light. Maya, Leo, look over there. Maya points to the forest edge. A deer steps out. It looks at them. It is calm. It eats some grass and walks away. Leo, nature is healing. Maya, we did a good job. Leo, we did. They stay by the river for a long time. The sun moves across the sky. It is a perfect day. Later that day, the mayor calls for them again. Mayor, Leo and Maya, please come here. They go to the town hall. The mayor has 2 medals. They are gold and have a sun picture on them. Mayor, for your bravery. You are the heroes of the sun. He puts the medals around their necks. The people clap. Leo, thank you, Mayor. Maya, thank you. Leo looks at his medal. It is heavy. It reminds him of the heavy door at the castle. But this heavy thing is good. Maya, as long as you wear these, everyone will know what you did. Leo, I will wear it with pride. Maya, me too. The day ends. The sun goes down. The colors in the sky are pink and orange. It is not dark and scary like before. It is pretty. Leo and Maya walk to their homes. Leo, good night, Maya. Maya, good night, Leo. Leo goes inside. He takes off the medal. He puts it on his table next to his bed. He looks at it one last time. He knows that he is brave. He knows that he can do hard things. And he knows he has a best friend who can do hard things too. The village sleeps. The sunstone glows. Peace is in the valley, and it will stay that way for a long time. 1 year has passed since the Shadow King fell. The village of Sun Valley is bright and green. There are flowers everywhere. The houses are painted in yellow and blue colors. In the middle of the town square, the sunstone sits on its stand. It glows with a steady, warm light. It makes a soft humming sound that makes everyone feel safe. Leo stands in a grassy field near the edge of the village. He's taller now. His hair is a little longer. He wears a brown tunic. He holds a wooden sword in his hand. A group of 5 small children stands in front of him. They all have small wooden sticks. They look at Leo with wide eyes. Leo, okay, everyone, listen up. The most important thing is your feet. You have to stand strong. Leo spreads his feet apart. He bends his knees. The children copy him. Some of them wobble. One little boy falls down on his bottom. The other kids giggle. Leo, it is okay. Get back up. If you fall, you have to get up fast. Boy, like this, Leo. Leo, yes, that is perfect. Now hold your stick like a shield. Maya walks over to the field. She wears a long blue dress. She carries a basket of apples. She looks happy. She watches Leo teach the children. Maya, you are a good teacher, Leo. Leo, thanks, Maya. They are learning fast. They want to be guardians too. Maya, that is good. We need more guardians, just in case. Leo tells the children to take a break. They run to Maya. She gives them each a red apple. They sit in the grass and eat. Maya, my dad says the harvest is the best ever this year. The pumpkins are huge. Leo, my mum made 3 pies yesterday. We have too much food. It is a good problem to have. Maya, it is hard to believe it has been a year. The dark castle feels like a bad dream. Leo, sometimes I still dream about the wolves, but then I wake up and see the sun. Maya, the shadows are gone, Leo. The stone keeps them away. They look at the sunstone in the distance. Even from here they can see its light. Villagers are walking around the square. They are hanging up banners. Leo, the festival is tonight. Are you ready? Maya, yes, I have my dress ready. And I practiced a new light trick for the show. Leo, I cannot wait to see it. The sun begins to set. The sky turns purple and gold. The villagers gather in the square. There is music playing on fiddles and drums. Long tables are full of food. The mayor stands by the stone. He looks older, but he stands straight. Mayor, welcome everyone. Today we celebrate the light. Today we celebrate our heroes. Everyone claps. They look at Leo and Maya. Leo feels his face get hot. He's still shy. Maya waves at the crowd. Mayor, let the feast begin. The party is loud and fun. People dance in circles. Leo dances with his mum. Maya dances with her dad. Later, Leo and Maya sit on a bench away from the noise. They eat cake. Leo, this is a good life, Maya. Maya, yes it is. No monsters, no fighting. Just peace. Leo looks at the dark forest far away. It is quiet. Leo, do you think we'll ever have to use the real swords again? Maya touches the necklace she wears. It has a small piece of crystal in it. Maya, I do not know. But if we do, we are ready. We are not just children anymore. Leo, right. We are the heroes of the sun. Maya laughs. She bumps her shoulder into his. Maya, you are still just Leo to me. Leo, and you are just Maya. They sit there and watch the stars come out. The sunstone glows behind them. The light touches their backs. They are safe. The village is safe. The story of the Shadow King is just a story now. But Leo and Maya know the truth. They know that light is strong, and they know that as long as they stand together, the darkness can never win. Leo, happy anniversary, partner. Maya, happy anniversary. Leo. They smile and watch the moon rise over the peaceful valley.